Every by-election is tough. That's the nature of modern politics
Things
in
aren't
Australia.
that grim for the coalition, are they, Fadden?
Well, they're always tough.
Scott Morrison believed to be the next Liberal MP to go after ex-Minister Stuart Robert quit Parliament, triggering another by-election. JobSeeker set to increase by up to $40 a fortnight, with power bill relief also expected as Tuesday's federal budget approaches. King Charles III crowned amid anti-monarchy protests in the United Kingdom, with 52 arrested during the coronation. And Victorian Liberal MPs move again to expel Moira Deeming as she denies threatening to sue her own party. Good evening. Former Prime Minister Scott Morrison is believed to be the next Liberal MP who will resign from Parliament following Stuart Robert this weekend announcing he will quit politics. Morrison is already set to take up a role with the Centre for a New American Security, which is a think tank based in Washington. If he resigns soon, as it has been reported will happen, we could be set for two by-elections on just one day. Political editor Roman McKinnon has more.
Barely a month since the last federal by-election, but now voters in the Queensland seat of Fadden will head to the polls later this year following the resignation of Stuart Robert. In his statement, Robert said it has been a pleasure serving the people of Australia as a minister and shadow minister, and he will fulfil final duties as an MP in the coming weeks, meaning at this stage we don't have a date for the by-election. Robert has been the member for Fadden since 2007. At last year's election, he had a swing of around 4% against him, but still holds the seat on a two-party preferred margin of over 10%. One Nation, the United Australia Party, and Liberal Democrats had a combined vote of more than 18%, while Labor's primary vote was around 22%. The other big resignation we understand could happen soon is the one of the former Prime Minister Scott Morrison. A number of media reports indicate he could be gone within days following the federal budget, or it could be as late as this year. Morrison is the member for Cook. He holds that seat by over 12% on preferences, even after a swing away from him. If he goes, that will be the third by-election, and if it's soon, it could be held as the same day as the Fadden by-election. Given how less marginal these two seats are compared to Aston, there's a very possible chance Labor will not run in them, with it not being unusual for a majority government not to compete in a by-election if they have a low chance in it.
By-elections, sorry, they're all tough, David. They always will be, and but I do think it's a test of whether Labor's going to get inflation under control in the economy. And
a test for Peter Dutton, though?
Well, I think it's a test for whether inflation is being dealt with. Look, the truth of the matter is we know there is no bigger conversation around the kitchen table right now than this inflation that is hitting. It's a tax on everyone and everything. And we want to see a budget that deals with that. And no doubt that will be a feature in the coming months, including in these by-elections.
This is Fadden, though. Surely, how confident are you? Surely the LNP can hold Fadden.
Well, as I say, every election and every by-election is tough. That's the nature of modern politics in Australia.
Things aren't that grim for the coalition, are they, Fadden?
Well, they're always tough.
Interesting to note, it's also been reported the LNP will look towards a local candidate this time, following what happened in Aston, where their candidate was said to be parachuted into the seat.
The federal government will reportedly increase JobSeeker by up to $40 a fortnight in the budget, which is due to be handed down by Treasurer Jim Chalmers on Tuesday night. Sky News reports the payment will increase across the board by around $2.85 a day. It follows initial reports there would be an increase for over 55s who are on the payment. Green Senator Janet Rice says if the reports are true, Labor's planned increase to JobSeeker is, quote, less than even the Liberals did under Scott Morrison, and is a slap in the face to everyone in need of in desperate need of substantive increase to the Centrelink payments. She added that this is still $500 below the Henderson poverty line per a fortnight and more than $200 below the recommendations of the government's own hand-picked Economic Inclusion Advisory Committee. Deputy Liberal leader Susan Lee has told Sky News that increasing JobSeeker slightly is the best thing Labor can do for people on the payments. Central Alliance MP Rebecca Sharkey, she's also told 6 News she wants to see an increase.
I've been campaigning for an increase on JobSeeker and been talking about that for many, many years. The government today is sort of saying that they're going to do something for the over 55s. I think that's really important. We know that people that are over 55, particularly if they don't, particularly older women, if they don't have a very strong work history and qualifications, have a very difficult time getting employment. There's a couple of things around JobSeeker that I think we need to do more broadly and just around Centrelink payments. First of all, I think we need to lift the threshold that anyone can earn before they start losing 50% on the dollar in their payments. I think we need to, in this budget very much look at Commonwealth rent assistance. The one that's glaringly obvious to me, aside from lifting JobSeeker, and I remember years ago we were campaigning on an extra $75 a week, is youth allowance. Youth allowance is so pitifully low that I don't know how any young person could possibly afford to live out of home in any capacity on youth allowance independent. It's just so low that it's impossible. It's impossible. I think, really the rate in real terms hasn't gone up since I was 21, and I think I was getting Oz study back then when I was at uni and supplementing that with a bit of work. So I think that there's a number of measures. I'm keen to see what the government does as well with respect to single parents and when their youngest child turns, whatever age that is now, it's currently 8, and them transitioning off the single parents payment and onto JobSeeker. Back in a committee that I was on with Russell Broadbent, he was the chair. This is going back to 2000 and maybe 18, 19. I could be wrong there, but I'm pretty sure that's about the time frame. He we had an inquiry with respect to intergenerational poverty, and even then one of the recommendations was having a look at raising that age where a parent transitions from one payment to the other, because we know that we have an obscene number of children that are in poverty in this nation. That's a key component of it. So yes, I'd like to see not just over 55s, but more broadly JobSeeker and particularly youth allowance. And I find it hard to understand how we can say we can't change that because it's inflationary, but then at the same time we've still got the stage 3 tax cuts in there. To me, surely they would be more of a threat to inflation than lifting JobSeeker.
Also expected in this budget, 5 million households and 1 million businesses will receive up to $500 relief on their power bills as part of a $1.5 billion package. Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek has also said Labor will invest more than $40 million to address what she's called a critical backlog of repair work to Sydney Harbour. Now, $45.2 million will be allocated in the budget for the harbour. It includes 26.5 million to replace rotting wharves and docks, 7.6 to repair immediate safety concerns such as rock falls from cliffs, 5 million for critical maintenance work to keep sites open and safe, 3.5 million for heritage advice and project management, and 2.6 million to repair critical infrastructure including unstable seawalls and deteriorating wharfs. For his analysis on the upcoming budget, 6 News spoke to Steve Beattie from the Australian Democrats.
It's going to be a tricky budget for the government, Leo. I think there's no doubt about that. The economic conditions broadly are tricky. So in fairness to them, they've got a few things that they need to balance and a few things that they need to navigate as they go through this process of delivering what is an important marker in the economic year, and certainly an important marker for a government to deliver. We've got inflation running at 7%, and it is coming down, but it's historically very high, and it's obviously well outside the target band that the Reserve Bank looks for of that 2 to 3%. Wages growth are running at 3.3% at the moment, year on year, which means real wages are going backwards, and going backwards fast. The estimates for growth in the economy are only 1.5%, and that's due to persist for the next 2 years. So that's sluggish at best. And the last thing the government wants to do is tip the economy into a recession. That would not look good for them. On the flip side, we've got $895 billion in national debt. It's forecast to go up over $1 trillion over the next 4 years. And that's something else that they very much have to consider. All of that hits our lowest income households the most. So they're being hit hardest at the moment with that combination of factors. And absolutely, the change in the rate for JobSeeker recipients for all forms of support payments really need to be increased. And it's something that everyone is going to be looking for in this budget.
So in general, and you did touch on it there, but you know, given there's both the international challenges, especially around issues like inflation, there's things that you could argue were just kind of left over from the coalition government. They haven't just emerged in the past 12 months. Do you think there's any way that the Treasurer of the government will be able to please people, or is this going to be one of those tough budgets with one of those the line about this is what needs to be done, there's no avoiding this, etc., etc.?
I think that they definitely have ways that they can deliver relief for households, especially those low-income households, and do it in a way that's not going to drive inflation, and do it in a way that's not going to drive up the debt further. We know at the moment that due to inflation, government revenue is actually up. So there's an expectation that we'll actually be much closer to a surplus in this budget than was even expected in the October budget, where it was forecast at about $36 billion. So as a result of inflation, as a result of higher commodity prices, we actually think that the budget may come in much closer to either a break-even point or maybe even a surplus. The government has lots of options, though, in terms of how it can deliver that kind of cost of living relief to those low-income households without driving up inflation. It can do things like add items to the pharmaceutical benefit scheme. It can increase the Medicare rebate for GP visits. It can increase access to mental health services. It can, and it has already announced that it will introduce childcare and early childhood education benefits into households, I think up to 95% of the cost. These are all things that actually have a deflationary impact on the economy. They actually bring prices down rather than drive them up. All of those things can be targeted at those low-income households. It doesn't require them to increase any of those job seeker rates or any of those benefit rates, but at the same time, they can in fact target those households to provide that relief. That being said, there's a very, very clear message that came out of the government's Economic Inclusion Advisory Forum just a couple of weeks ago, where they made it very, very clear that those rates of support benefits are far too low and they really need to be increased. They're actually acting as a barrier for people to participate in society and do things like find a job.
The other thing that isn't actually coming into effect this year, but it's still talked about, was talked about last year, stage three tax cuts. And the government, they've talked about it. I think they've been kind of adamant that they're not going to move, although they have at the same time, I will say there have been reports that they will move on it eventually. I don't think we're expecting it this budget. But this again, kind of like the issue of raising JobSeeker, it seems to be an issue that will not go away for them until a kind of definitive stance is taken, or something like that.
Nor should it, Leo. It's bad policy. It was bad policy when the coalition government introduced it. It was bad policy when Labor supported it when in opposition. It remains bad policy given the state of the economy. It is deeply problematic in terms of driving inequality. It degrades the progressive nature of our taxation system at a really structural level. It's expensive at $20 billion a year, thereabouts, to begin with. That's money that we could be spending elsewhere, and it's being heavily targeted at high income earners. Most of the benefits go to people earning over $120,000 a year. And the higher up those income brackets you go, the greater the percentage of savings that they get. All the way up to people earning $200,000 a year will receive a $9,000 a year tax break. Of that money, 2/3 of it goes to men. Only one third of it will go to women, because that's the nature of those higher income tax brackets. So the idea that it should go through at all is kind of nonsense. The government has avoided dealing with the issue. They've said it's something that was agreed by the previous government. They're not going to deal with it now. It doesn't come into effect until July 1st, 2024, so it doesn't need to be touched. I don't agree with that. I think the public needs the certainty that says that money is not going to be given to those wealthy and high income earners, that we are going to use it elsewhere. And they certainly need to stop using it as an excuse for us not to be able to afford things like raising the JobSeeker rate.
And don't forget, Six News will have live special coverage of Budget 2023. It'll be on our website, sixnewsau.com, and on our YouTube channel. You can just search Six News AU to find us. That'll be from 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Standard Time, in fact, this Tuesday. Meanwhile, King Charles III has been crowned at a ceremony in London overnight. While many in the UK celebrated the historic event, we've also seen protests, at least 42 arrested as the coronation was underway. Six News' Brooklyn Caldwell, who's been in Europe covering the lead up to the coronation, has more.
The coronation did go very smoothly indeed. There were some arrests with protesters. There were suspected protesters to have eggs on them. 29,000 police out in force all around the UK. Some even came in from Scotland just to give the line a hand today with yesterday's coronation. So that's very historic in itself. We saw that $200 million was put into security operations to keep all of everyone safe. The journalists, they were all put into a corner outside Buckingham Palace under the white tents. The weather did not put any celebrations of this big magical event off. Everything carried on as normal. We don't really know what a typical coronation looks like. We haven't seen one in over 70 years, but of course, this was the first one for many of us to see. You have to be at least 90 to have a mature recollection of the last coronation of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Now, this was a very historic day indeed. Of course, there was a 14-year-old boy who opened the ceremony. That was really warm to see as well. That spoke a lot of words, and there was a lot of actors, as you say. There was a lot of actors, people from all around the world. World leaders came in as well, including our Governor General and Anthony Albanese, along with some of our military veterans, some Victoria Cross recipients. They were there as well for the coronation. They were invited as a part of the 2,200 members, private guests who were invited to attend the coronation. That is a slimmed down version of the crowd as well, considering that Queen Elizabeth had 4,000 members attend her coronation back in 1953. But yeah, this was a very historic day. This was a unique day, as you say. But it's going to be a new sign for the British monarchy. We're talking about three generations of of kings. Now, this is how it was back in the day. There was only a queen if there wasn't a successor or an heir to the throne that was male, obviously. So this is going to be, a tradition that will be kept. We know that Queen Camilla also was crowned yesterday at Westminster Abbey, but this is a ceremony that has 1,000 years of history. King Charles was the 40th monarch to be crowned at Westminster Abbey, British monarch to be crowned at Westminster Abbey yesterday. So that's a very, very big tradition to carry. But he wasn't nervous, I find. He was quiet, cool, calm and collected as he was led out through the gates of Buckingham Palace and all the way down to Westminster Abbey. That is a 1.4 mile journey down the Royal Mile rather. And there was crowds everywhere. There was tens of thousands of people flocking in around London to witness from the sideline, if you will, this very historic day. Even some Australians were caught there camping out all night to see the military parade. The processions were, of course, a real highlight as well. We know that one soldier did faint. He collapsed. He was from the Royal Artillery Regiment. He's now thought to be okay. But many of the military personnel were up and about from 3 a.m. Finally rehearsing for this big historic day. So certainly, like you say, there's going to be a few kings ahead of us, but Kate, as we know, will be the Queen Consort as well for King William V when he takes to the throne.
At least 9 people, including a gunman, are dead following a mass shooting at a mall in Texas. It's understood the gunman, believed to be acting alone, stepped out of a car outside the mall in Allen, Texas, and began firing before later being killed by a police officer. At least 9 victims with gunshot wounds were taken to hospital. At least 8 people have died total, while 4 are in a stable condition. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has called the shooting an unspeakable tragedy. Video posted online showing people running through a parking lot while gunshots could be heard. And funerals have begun to be held in Serbia after 2 mass shootings within the space of 48 hours. A combined 17 people are dead, including children, and 21 injured. The first shooting took place at a school in Belgrade and was reportedly carried out by a teenage boy. The second in a village south of the country's capital. In that second shooting, a gunman fired an automatic weapon from a moving vehicle with a massive overnight search reportedly involving more than 600 officers leading to his arrest. The shooting at a school was Serbia's worst mass shooting in years. Victorian Liberal MPs are again moving to expel Moira Deeming as she denies threatening to sue her own party. The motion will be voted on this Friday and leader John Pesutto has already confirmed he will support it. But Lincoln Holmes has more.
For the second time, Moira Deeming is facing an expulsion motion. 5 Victorian Liberals, including former leader Matthew Guy, have moved to expel the Upper House MP, who in recent weeks has started identifying as an independent Liberal. Last time the motion was moved, Deeming ended up being suspended until 2024. And she still remains a member of the broader party. Deeming in a statement yesterday denied threatening to sue the Liberal leadership team.
I can already feel that there is a growing sense of unity that we need to reform. I'm leading that reform project. It will take some time. So I'm asking Victorians to bear with me as a new leader as I bed down those reforms. Reform isn't easy. And often when you're reforming, there can often be a small group. In this case, there is a small group determined to thwart that process. But let me make it clear, as a new leader, I intend to reform the Liberal Party with my colleagues, and I know overwhelmingly they support me in that endeavour.
It's understood that unlike last time, the motion does have the numbers to pass. If she is expelled, Deeming could continue to identify as an independent Liberal or join another party. One Nation has previously said she's welcome to join them. The vote to expel her will be on Friday. Lincoln Holmes, 6 News.
As the long countdown to Tasmania joining the AFL in 2028 continues, former Tassie Devils and AFL player Mitch Robinson is speaking to 6 News. Robinson played for the Devils in their last VFL season in 2008. He says that he was told by the AFL, if a team doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. National reporter Austin Pollock has the exclusive details.
The back of a big week for the AFL, Tasmania now officially recognised in the state's dominant sporting code.
Tasmania belongs in our AFL and AFLW competitions, belongs in the national football conversation and belongs in the national fixture.
After decades of campaigning, the 19th AFL team will be in Tasmania, a new controversial 23,000-seat stadium earmarked to cost $715 million kicked off the final leg towards the announcement of the new team, something that AFL boss Gil McLachlan says is vital for any new club.
It's just great for the state.
Former Carlton and Brisbane Lions player Midge Robinson grew up in Tasmania and played for the Tassie Devils in the VFL back in 2008, telling 6 News exclusively there were limited pathways for him as a kid in Tassie.
Potentially an AFL team in the competition, it's no reason for players who aren't getting noticed down there that can stay put and really give back to the community, give back to the standard of football down there, because as soon as you turn 18, at the moment we'll just go play the VFL, SANFL, the Waffle, or whatever it may be, so you can get noticed.
The Tassie team may, however, find difficulty in sourcing its players, particularly those from interstate, with some players, including Hawthorn's captain, saying they wouldn't want to live down there. However, this isn't the perspective of all.
Definitely, I would have, with no disrespect to the Lions and the Blues, I would have left in a heartbeat to go play for Tassie. Yeah, and I'll say I absolutely love James Sicily. I've played against him for an amount of years, and I have a massive respect for him. He was just being honest about his view about living in a certain area. I know that you got a lot of passionate people that would play for the team, but I think it comes down to the culture.
The new team is also certain to help build the state's struggling economy, with some suggesting it could also become the home of the AFL's gather round after his tenure in Adelaide, with hopes all Tasmanians will get behind not only the new club, but also the AFL.
We need Tassie to come together, and I think we've been doing that in the past couple of years with a lot of the forums and the tweeters I've been seeing that they've been coming together and signing all those memberships and getting their signatures. And
the announcement comes after years of campaigning by Tasmanians for their state to be recognised in the national game. Robinson saying he asked the AFL why there isn't a team there now.
We had a meeting with Andrew Demetrio, who was that CEO at the time. I was at the Blues, and I think it was my second year, and he came to our club, and we had a chat to him, and he said, "Is there any questions from the group?" And I put my hand up, and a sheepish young kid who had a bit of ADHD thought I'd ask the question. I said, "Why isn't there a team in Tasmania?" And he gave me something that I remember till this day. Is a simple answer was like, everybody in Tasmania already watches football. So in my head, it was a simple, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense.
Something that the AFL is adamant about is a roof for the new stadium, saying a condition of the new team in Tasmania was that a roof were to be on the venue. However, they are concerned this means certain sports, including certain cricket matches, would not be allowed to play there.
Signed binding commitments with the Tasmanian government that committed to delivering on those conditions, including partnering with the federal government for the construction of a 23,000-seat roofed stadium.
It's a goal Tasmanians have had for a long time. Now, by 2028, it will all be reached. The team allowed to enter the AFL competition, then the VFL by 2025. Austin Pollock, 6 News.
All right, let's now check in with Ivan and Melly with a look what's making news right now on WAMN News.
Thanks, Leo. Tonight on WAMN News, remembering Jamie Schuster, tributes flowing over the death of a much-loved mental health and cultural advocate in Perth. An exclusive interview coming up.
Also tonight, changes looming over electoral boundaries as some seats might face the axe.
The government faces more questions over public housing for youths over shocking data.
High Voltage Festival tears up the streets of Fremantle with rock music and later Dr. Andrew Miller's comment. Join us tonight on the WMN News Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Thanks both Ivan and Melly there. Now to tomorrow's weather forecast right across the country. Brisbane will be sunny, 22 degrees. Partly cloudy for Sydney, 16 there, a top of just 12 in Canberra, but starting the day at 0 in our nation's capital. Meanwhile, 14 and a chance of showers in Melbourne. Also 14, heavy rain expected in Hobart. Adelaide, also 14. 18 and sunny in Alice Springs. 24 in Perth. And a Darwin, a warm top of 30 degrees. A reminder of the top stories we are following on 6 News this hour, and former PM Scott Morrison is believed to be the next Liberal MP who will resign from Parliament following Stuart Robert this weekend announcing he would quit politics. Morrison is already set to take up a role with a think tank based in Washington. If he does resign soon, we could be set for 2 by-elections in one day. And the federal government will reportedly increase JobSeeker by up to $40 a fortnight in the budget, which is due to be handed down by the Treasurer on Tuesday night. Sky News reports the payment will increase across the board by around $2.85 a day. It follows initial reports there would be an increase for over 55s who are on the payment. That is 6 News for this hour. There is more news 24/7 on our website, 6newsau.com, and on social media. Just search 6NewsAU to find us. More news coverage continues right after this. For now though, I'm Leonardo Puglisi. Thanks for your company. Good night.
Almost a year on from the federal election, what will Jim Chalmers be delivering in his second ever budget speech? Impartial reporting on what the Albanese government's decisions will mean for you.